Hello and welcome back. I'm Daniel Cordova, and this is Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, Part 2, the first of the three spirits. When Scrooge awoke, the chimes of a neighboring church struck 12, then stopped. 12. It was past 2 when he went to bed. The clock was wrong. An icicle must have got into the works. 12. Why, it isn't possible, said Scrooge, that I can have slept through a whole day and far into another night. Scrooge went to bed again and thought and thought and thought it over and over and over and could make nothing of it. Was it a dream or not? Scrooge remembered on a sudden that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1. He resolved to lie awake until the hour was past. Finally, dong! A light flashed up in the room upon the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn, and Scrooge found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them. It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man and being diminished into a child's proportions. Its hair was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, but the strangest thing about it was that from the crown of its head there sprung a bright, clear jet of light, by which all this was visible, and a great extinguisher for a cap which it now held under its arm.
"Are you the spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me?" asked Scrooge.
"I am the ghost of Christmas past."
"Long past?"
inquired Scrooge. "No, your past." It put out its strong hand as it spoke and clasped him gently by the arm. "Rise and walk with me."
"I am mortal," said Scrooge. "I am liable to fall."
"Bear but a touch of my hand upon your heart," said the spirit, "and you shall be upheld in more than this." As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road with fields on either hand. It was a clear, cold winter day with snow upon the ground.
"Good heaven," said Scrooge as he looked about him. "I know this place. I was a boy here."
And truly they were at the school where Ebenezer Scrooge had boarded as a child. Scrooge recognized every gate and post and tree. "These are but the shadows of things that have been," said the ghost. "They have no consciousness of us." Although most of the students had left school to go home for Christmas, there was one boy at his desk yet. "The school is not quite deserted," said the ghost. "A solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there still." Scrooge said he knew it, and he sobbed to see his poor forgotten self as he used to be. The spirit touched him on the arm and pointed to his younger self, intent upon his reading. Scrooge remembered all of the stories that he had read that Christmas. Ali Baba, Valentine and his wild brother Orson, Robinson Crusoe and Friday and the parrot. He laughed because they were as alive to him now as they were when he was a boy. Then he said, "Poor boy," and he cried again. "What is the matter?" asked the spirit.
"Nothing," said Scrooge, "nothing. There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should like to have given him something, that's all."
Scrooge looked at the ghost and then glanced anxiously toward the door. It opened and a little girl, much younger than the boy, came darting in. It was his little sister Fan. She was so happy. She had asked their father if Ebenezer could come home this Christmas and to stay at home with the family. The father had agreed and sent Fan in a coach to bring her brother home. "Home, little Fan," returned the boy. "Yes," said the child, "home forever and ever. But first, we're to be together all the Christmas long and have the merriest time in the world." "She was always a delicate creature whom a breath might have withered," said the ghost. "But she had a large heart. She died a woman and had, as I think, children." "One child," Scrooge returned. "True," said the ghost, "your nephew Fred." Suddenly the ghost and Scrooge were transported to another Christmas at a warehouse in the city. It was Fezziwig's, where Scrooge apprenticed as a young man. Scrooge recognized him. "Why, it's old Fezziwig!"
Old Fezziwig called out in a jovial voice, "Yo-ho there, Ebenezer, Dick Wilkins." Scrooge's former self, now a grown young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice, Dick Wilkins. At Fezziwig's command, they closed up the shop and cleared the floor for the party. A fiddler soon arrived and started to play. Mrs. Fezziwig arrived, and so did many young women and young men. There was food and drink and dancing as more neighbors and townfolks arrived. There were dances and there were games and more dances, and there was plenty of food of every kind. Old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig, and the old couple outdanced them all. Eventually, the ball broke up as the guests left. The Fezziwigs shook hands with each person individually and wished them a very sincere Merry Christmas. Ebenezer and Dick bedded down that night, and they were praising their hosts for this splendid party. And certainly all of the guests went to bed that night praising Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig. Now, during the whole of this time, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene and with his former self. "A small matter," said the ghost, "to make these silly folks so full of gratitude. He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money. Is that so much that he deserves all this praise? It isn't that, Spirit. He had the power to render us happy or unhappy. His power lies in words and looks. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune." "What's the matter?" asked the ghost. "Nothing," said Scrooge. "Something, I think," the ghost insisted. "No," said Scrooge. "No, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now, that's all." "My time grows short," observed the spirit. Again, Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of his life. There was now an eager, greedy, restless motion in the eye. He sat by the side of a fair young girl in a mourning dress, weeping. It was his betrothed, Belle. "Another idol has displaced me," she said, "and if it can cheer and comfort you, I have no just cause to grieve." "What idol has displaced you?" he rejoined. "A golden one." The young man tried to justify his pursuit of wealth by condemning the harshness of poverty. She reminded him that they were both poor when they fell in love, and that now he had become a different man. She told him that she was releasing him now. "Have I ever sought release?" "In words, no, never. But tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now?" "Oh, no. If you were free today, would you choose a dowerless girl? Do I not know that your repentance and regret would surely follow? I do, and I release you with a full heart for the love of the man you once were." She left him, and they parted. "Spirit," said Scrooge, "show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me?" "One shadow more," exclaimed the ghost. They were in another scene and place, a room, and Scrooge saw Belle again, but now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter. There were other children, too, more than Scrooge could count, and they were tumultuous and noisy. The mother and daughter laughed heartily. But now a knocking at the door was heard, and the father entered, attended by a man laden with Christmas toys and presents. The shouts of wonder and delight with which the development of every package was received, the joy and gratitude, the ecstasy. Then, by degrees, the children tired and got, by one stair at a time, to the top of the house, where they went to bed. And now Scrooge looked on more attentively than ever. And when he thought that such another creature as the daughter, quite as graceful and as full of promise, might have called him father, and his sight grew very dim indeed. "Belle," said the husband, "I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon." "Who was it?" "Mr. Scrooge. I passed his office window. His partner lies upon the point of death, I hear, and there he sat alone. Quite alone in the world, I do believe." "Spirit," said Scrooge in a broken voice, "remove me from this place. I cannot bear it." He turned upon the ghost and wrestled with it. In the struggle, Scrooge observed that the spirit's light was burning bright. He seized the extinguisher cap and by a sudden action pressed it down upon its head. The spirit dropped beneath it.
Scrooge was conscious of being exhausted and, further, of being in his own bedroom. He barely had time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep.